And this is going to lead me into the talk tonight, and this is kind of why I brought this thing, because this is my segue into the actual presentation tonight, which is all about safety, right? And when we look in this accidents in North America, it's like the same thing. I read this every year, and I find it kind of interesting, but in some ways, it's kind of like reading the same stuff over and over and over, right? 50% or more of the accidents in here and the deaths in here are climbing accidents related to anchor failure. So somebody thought they set up a secure anchor and the anchor failed and they fell and they died. Or, and it's hard to believe, rappelling off the end of the rope, right? And I think they mention in here that like in so this is like accidents in North America 2025, published in 2025, but it's about all the accidents in 2024, right? North America, Canada, Mexico, and some mountaineering kind of stuff. And they have a really nice article in there about rappelling and rappelling safety. I'll talk about some of the highlights tonight because it does apply to SAR, right? We build anchors and we do some rappelling. And so we can learn from some of these accidents and avoid many of these potentially fatal errors by some simple things and some repetitive things that we'll talk about. So I think they mentioned in 2024, there were like 3 or 4 well-known mountaineers, well-known climbers, right? People that do climbs that wind up in books like this, right? High-level stuff. And they died in rappelling accidents. So these are people that are doing this stuff all the time, right? And have a ton of experience, and yet through simple errors, they died doing this, right? So how can we prevent some of this stuff? We're going to talk about that a little bit tonight. So one of the things that we can do that's quite simple is, and I want to make a pitch that our team gets in the habit of doing this every single time we drop a rope somewhere, right, is we simply tie a stopper knot in the end of the rope, right? You can't rappel past a stopper knot, right? And so you can look on the Grog's animated knots, but a stopper knot, the recommended one, it's called a barrel knot, right? So you just take the end of your rope, you make a loop, you go behind, you make an X, right, like so. You wrap it back around, come through the top, come through this loop, and you get this little barrel knot. And that barrel knot sits down at the end of the rope. So if we throw this over the edge, we're going to rappel. There's our rope. Now, if someone's rappelling down and they get near the end of the rope, guess what? They hit the knot. They don't go off the end of the rope, right? So very, very simple. So we're going to practice that on Saturday, and we're going to talk about some of our safety checks, and that's going to be one of the things that I want our team to always do. Every rope we throw down that we're going to rappel on, we should have a stopper knot on. And that barrel knot is probably, there's different things you can do, but the barrel knot is probably one of the easiest to tie and one of the quickest ones. So let's talk some more about safety and some personal protective equipment. So with personal protective equipment, what do we start with? Helmet, right. Start with a head. So anytime we're in an area, and what's that to protect us? I mean, kind of, you think about it, like why would I wear a helmet? Could fall and hit my head, right? Falling rocks from above. And again, if you read this, there's a couple of cases of falling rocks from above, hit the belayer in the head, knocked the belayer out, swept the climber off the climb. Like this kind of stuff happens, right? And where we're going to be on Saturday, at least this year, there probably should not be much risk of falling rocks from overhead. However, we're going to wear helmets because the way that we train is the way that we practice, right? So helmets, gloves are very important when working with rope, right, to avoid rope burn. So any gloves will do, but like good leather gloves are probably good for something like that. And obviously you want closed-toed shoes, right? So some basic safety things that sound almost ridiculous to stand up here and talk about, but yet I can pretty much guarantee you that we're going to see at least one of these things, two of these things happen on Saturday, and whoever sees it should just kindly correct the person that's doing it, because they're probably not even aware that they're doing it, right? But don't step on the rope. Don't step on a working rope. One, it's not safe, right, for obvious reasons. And two, it's not good for the rope either, right, because it grinds dirt into the rope. Don't step over ropes when the ropes are in action, especially like if we have a twin tension rope system set up. The last thing I want to do is straddle the rope, and all of a sudden somebody falls, and now I get tripped up, and if I'm near the edge, my foot gets caught up, and if I'm not properly protected, I'm in the hot zone, over the edge I go. And then the other thing we have to be really careful about, kind of another statement of the obvious, is edge protection, right? So if this rope is going over a really nasty, rocky edge, and that's a moving rope, that's a potentially dangerous situation, right? So we either have to re-rig our anchor to avoid that, or if it's simply unavoidable, we have to put some type of protection down. And for those that are doing the more advanced training on Saturday, and everybody will get a chance to see this, we have some edge protection, it's like a plastic kind of sheet that has a little cord on it, so you kind of tie that to a tree or something so this thing doesn't go over the edge, but it provides a little bit of edge protection, and we can practice putting that in place. We talked about the stopper knot on the rope. Safety tails on our knots. Anybody know what a safety tail on a knot is? Like, how much tail should I leave on a knot? Is this enough?
Yes.
How do I know? What's a good way to measure that? Yeah. So if I grab it like this, my little finger goes down by the knot, I should have some rope sticking out of the end, right? So all of our tails on the knot should have, right? So if I tied this the other way and I did something like this, not enough, right? I should retie that knot so there's a little bit of rope sticking out the end, right? So that's the tail on the knot. For our purposes in search and rescue, we're really using locking carabiners only. So when we build and Kevin alluded to that, talked about that a little bit, when we're building anchors, we're using locking carabiners. When we're tying into rappel, we're only using locking carabiners. So for our purposes, if you wanted to use a non-locking carabiner to make a cheapskate locker, we would advise you to get a locking carabiner instead. But sometimes some of these things are kind of handy, right? Like if I want to clip my gloves onto my harness, or I have some Dyneema cord, or a prusik, or something like that. Some of these, I don't necessarily want to have that locked onto my harness, right? It's nice and easy to use a non-locking carabiner, and God forbid my Dyneema cord falls off, that's not necessarily life-threatening, right? But for anything that we're building in rescue systems, we're going to use locking carabiners, and you'll see that on the twin tension rope system, because that's the only kind of carabiners that we have in the kit. Anytime we're near the edge, again, we're not going to be in vertical terrain, but assuming we were in or near vertical terrain, we always designate what we call a hot zone. Right? A hot zone is an area where if you tripped and fell, or something happened to you, you stepped over the rope, you stepped on the rope, you got snagged by the rope, something happened, you could potentially fall over the edge, right? So we designate a hot zone, and then we always have a safety officer who is 100% in charge of the hot zone, and that's their job. They're not doing anything else, right? They're not multitasking. They're not the leader who's going, well, why don't you guys go over here and hook this up and then do this over here. They're focused solely on the hot zone, and no one enters the hot zone unless they're fully rigged up so that if they actually fell, they would get stopped from going over the edge. And then we need clear communication. So anytime we're going to do a rope operation, we need to be very clear about what we're doing. We'll talk more about that in both groups on Saturday. Anybody that's done rock climbing knows, right, some of the basics, right? On belay is on, climbing, climb on. Simple things like that, right? You could say, I'm ready to rappel. Okay, everything's checked, whatever, right? But it's got to be very clear communication. And for our twin tension rope system, I put some of these little reference books in each rope kit. And this is by Remote Rescue Training out of the University of Utah. But they have a little communication thing in the back, right? Because who's going to remember this thing, right? So we're getting ready to lower, and we say, quiet. The operation is about to begin. We do a concise rebrief. We're going to do a twin tension rescue lower. down to the ledge. Any questions? And then rope 1, or rope red, ready. Rope 1, red says ready. Rope blue, ready. Edge protection, ready. Attendant, ready. Attendant, approach the edge. Tension the ropes. Over the edge, right? So it's a very clear type of communication, and we do it the same way every time, right? Pilots use, I'm pretty sure, exactly the same kind of stuff, right? Same way every time. That way everyone gets familiar. So when we're out there using the twin tension rope system, unless you memorize this, I'd like to see whoever's in charge of operations pull this thing out and start using this on Saturday during our training. And then finally, the last thing that I had that I think is probably one of the most important things, anytime anybody is going to rappel or we're going to lower anything, we're always going to have an independent visual and tactile inspection of the system from anchor to person. And what does independent means? It means if I'm the guy that rigged the anchor, I don't double check my own anchor, right? Gareth comes over, who did nothing to build my anchor, and he checks my anchor, right? And he's going to start at the anchor, and he's going to look at the anchor, and he's going to check the carabiners, make sure the carabiners are locked, make sure the knots are tied correctly, all the way to me. My harness is on correctly, it's looped in, tied in correctly, my knot is tied in correctly, and everything is ready to go. So, and we're going to do that each and every time, always, no exceptions. When you read this book, it's terrifying how many accidents happened because super experienced people tied an anchor and didn't lock the carabiner. Or there was one example of somebody who was halfway up some huge wall or something somewhere, and he looked down and he was like, I didn't double back his figure of 8. So he wasn't even really tied into the rope, right? Really scary stuff. So all of us can get distracted, all of us can make mistakes, so we're always going to have an independent visual and tactile and secondary inspection, and our safety officer is ultimately going to be in charge of that, right? That's the person that's in charge of the hot zone. Or in the lower angle terrain, that'll be whoever's leading the operation. Questions on any of that stuff? Is that all? Sounds simple? Sounds simple, sounds very straightforward. Guarantee we're going to make mistakes. Guarantee somebody's going to be like, second time down, they got a tube tile device on, they hooked it up, they've done this 100 times, like, okay, I'm going to rappel down this rope now, and somebody's going to go, whoa, wait a minute, you didn't get checked. We're going to find people that are rappelling down without gloves on. Wait a minute, get your gloves on. Somebody might be forgetting a helmet. Somebody's going to step over a rope, I guarantee it. Somebody's going to step on a rope, and we're going to learn from this. But I want to get in the habit of double checking everything. Questions, any of that?
I have
Yeah.
one clarification when you move on to your next topic.
Yep.
Just so you guys know, reminder, we are not a certified rope rescue team. We are not going to get called on to do rope rescue on behalf of anyone or anything like that. So all of this training is so that you can assist and so that our skills continue to grow. And maybe one day we could become a rope rescue team. But we are not a rope rescue team. If we do get into a bad situation, we're going to be calling for a rope rescue team, and we're probably going to be getting ready for them, and we'll probably be assisting them. If they're like way late, we might even do it to self-rescue ourselves, but we are not a rope rescue team. So a little bit of clarification for that.
Yep, good point.
Second, there's a big difference on the gear that we use when you're just doing a personal thing. Like, I just need to rappel through this kind of slippery slope, right, to get down the hill a little bit, versus having a patient in a Stokes basket with 2 10 liters hauling up a face of a cliff. That's an entire different mindset. So be aware that like the gear for personal safety is a lot less dumbed down. Okay, these carabiners here are designed for personal safety, but we have better ones. They're stronger for when this is going to take like 2 or 3 people's weight. Okay, remember this was what, 25 kilonewtons or something like that, right? Yep. We want it higher than that when we're doing a multi-person event. Okay, and so we have them for the team, but these in critical spots, are not going to be used, okay? So just be aware of that, if there's any confusion, there are two main different thought patterns happening, right? One is personal safety in dangerous environments, right? You're going to be rappelling off of 6 mil rope and just hand lines and stuff like that, right? And rappelling and things like that. And then we have more rescue where someone's coming to assist someone to come up or go down. And that's a whole different system requiring significantly different stuff. So be aware which one you're standing in, okay? The rules that apply to one don't necessarily apply to the other when it comes to equipment and gear and operationals, okay? So just be aware of that. If you have any questions, just say, hey, are we doing a rescue or are we doing like just personal safety stuff, okay?
Right.
So, and in personal safety stuff, I'm assuming he's fully skilled to be able to rappel by himself, and he knows how to rappel, and I don't really have to watch him do that. I do have to check his whole system, but he's fully capable to navigate through that system, whereas a rescue he's not capable of doing that, okay? Which means we have a significantly higher loads, more anchors, more equipment, more team needs, and stuff like that. So pay attention to that. That is a big difference that you will be playing back and forth on Saturday, okay, between self-safety, navigating yourself through difficult environments, and actually kind of rescuing, okay? That's about
And to add to that, we really, the basic requirements, right, we're really not, even as a Yolo County Search and Rescue, we're not really operating anytime in a vertical environment. So we're not going to really be doing vertical rappels. We're going to be doing things like, and this is mostly for the type 1 people, right? Like, gosh, we need to search down there, and this slope is really steep and pretty muddy, and somebody in our group doesn't really feel too safe. Like, if I fall down this slope, I could get hurt, right? So, but we need to kind of get down there, or if it's not safe, we need to call in and just say we didn't search this area because it wasn't safe, right? But some of these skills give us the capability, right? If we've got a lightweight rope rescue system and everybody's got their personal gear, we can rig up a hasty harness, we can set up a very safe anchor, we can have somebody rappel down, check out that area, use their prusik to get back up the rope. These are the kind of things that we're going to be doing in the regular training on Saturday. And then for those who have those skills wired and otherwise might not show up, we have some advanced, more fun stuff to do with the twin tension rope system. So, yeah. So I was going to talk just really briefly, not a lesson on physics by any means, but just some background information so that you kind of understand like some of these numbers, and if we start talking about rope strength and anchor strength, just to kind of put some things in context, right? So bear with me, this will only take a minute. Remember back to physics, force equals mass times acceleration, right? So the mass is the person hanging on the end of the rope, right? And for our purposes, we say that the average person, weighs about, 220 pounds, right, which is 100 kilograms. And why do we use that number? Just because that's a pretty average number with some gear and maybe a backpack on and things like that. And it translates to a very nice, easy number to use. And then we say the force of gravity is about 10, right? It's actually 9.8. But let's use 10. So the nice thing is if we have a person hanging on the end of the rope, that's 1 kilonewton. Right? So that's what we're going to use with most of our stuff. If we put 2 people on the same rope, that would be 2 kilonewtons, right? And our ropes, if we take an average 8 millimeter static rope, the static rope is a non-stretchy rope. These are not the ropes we use in climbing, right? Where in rock climbing, you want a dynamic rope. If you take a fall, you want the rope to stretch and absorb some of the impact of the fall. The kind of stuff we do, we don't really want that rope to stretch, right? If I'm going down a slippery slope and I slip, I don't want that rope to stretch 10 meters and have me take a fall 10 meters, right? I want that rope to be static or very stiff, right? So even static ropes will stretch a little bit, but not the same as a dynamic rope. So an 8 millimeter rope is rated for 10 kilonewtons. That rating means you can hang 10 people off the end of that rope And if you put the 11th one on, that's probably about where it's too much for the rope, and the rope will break. Most of these, as Kevin alluded to, the carabiners are, if you load them properly in this axis, they're rated about 24, 22, 25 kilonewtons, right? So if I've got one of these things and an 8 millimeter rope on it, what's the weakest part of my system? It's actually the rope, right? So the rope is the weakest part of the system. So when we're building anchors and things like that, what do we have to do? As long as the anchor is stronger than the rope, it's strong enough, right? So you go, how do I know when my anchor is strong enough? Stronger than the rope, right? We're not going to hang 10 people off the end of the rope. The 11 millimeter ropes that we use in the twin tension system are actually rated for 20 kilonewtons. But again, we're using those ropes to haul rescue loads. How much do you think this is 1 inch tubular webbing? How much do you think the tubular webbing is rated at, roughly? Any guesses?
4.
4.
16.
It's actually pretty strong. It's 10. So this stuff's pretty strong. I brought this more for show and tell, but this is a little bit of this is Dyneema cord. And you can use, this was kind of part of my show and tell stuff too, that I was going to say, you could carry some of this to make a quick anchor. What do you guys think this thing's rated at? It's pretty thin. 24. So this is rated at 24. This is twice as strong as the webbing. So you'll see us out there making some anchors with this stuff, and you might go, is that safe? It's actually safer than the webbing.
The rating of the.
Yeah, it's right on here.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's 24. Yeah. So this, and they come in different lengths, right? This is 240 centimeters. They're color coded. This one's a little bit shorter.
Can we pass that around?
We can pass that around, yeah. So let me just throw this around. Feel free to pass that around. So just to kind of put things in context, right? 8 millimeter rope, 10 kilonewtons. 11 millimeter rope, 20 kilonewtons. Most carabiners, it'll say right on the side, but if we load them properly, probably in the 20s, right? This stuff in the 20s. So when we start to think about building an anchor, just having some of these basic numbers in the back of our head kind of helps us think, is this system strong enough, rather than just guessing at it. If we're building a rescue system.
Can I interject real quick? And then another thing you need to also know, for those of you who want to get technical, every time you tie a knot, the knot weakens your software even further. Okay? So the knots we use and train you guys with have a high retention of the strength of the nylon, right? So if you start using weird knots, you're going to weaken this significantly. Some knots weaken it like over 50%, right? So if I were to tie a really terrible knot in here, this might be 24, but I just weakened it to 12 because I tied a terrible knot, right? So pay attention. That's why we teach you the knots we teach you, is because they retain a high level of this strength to go at. And I think the highest is figure 8. It's like 80% is the highest you can go. Maybe 85% or something like that. So remember that as well, that all your knots reduce your strength as well.
And if you really want to geek out on this stuff, it's all in here. The rope technician field guide. There's one of these in each one of the twin tension rope kits. Angie.
Don't laugh, but does a bite do the same thing or less?
No.
What?
Does a bite do the
No.
A
same
bite in the rope is just, no, it wouldn't, because a bite is just sort of a loop in the, it's like a loop in the rope, right? So if I just took a bite,
A clofitch would.
like if I just did this, I haven't really weakened the rope, right? I've just turned the rope a little bit. But if I start doing this and tying knots in it, that's what can weaken
And
it.
also, a bite is not useful. You
Yeah.
can't really do anything with just a bite.
So whenever you're pulling the strands like this, the strands that are going, think of it as a bundle of strands. The strands that are going around the outside are doing more work than the strands on the inside. They have to move further, right? So the strands on the outside are going to break first, while the strands on the inside are not. If you just double it over or around something, here, hold this around me, like this is actually twice the strength. because I'm dividing the weight around me, right? Forget what's tied it on. This is actually doubling the strength of this, because now half of the load, if I'm a tree, half of the load is going this way, and half of the weight is going this way. So a bite, technically, if done correctly, is actually making it stronger, okay? So if you make 3 or 4 wraps of this, it's 3 or 4 times the strength of this, minus the knot, and depending on where the knot is and what knot you use, okay?
Like an anchor wrap 3 pull 2 kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yes, very strong, because you're getting multiple strands, right? Again, think of it this way, where I'm actually cinching down on this knot. That's what weakens it, okay? When it's actually cinching down and the knot is between the load and the anchor, that's when it becomes the problem for the weakening. Does that make sense?
If you,
We don't take ropes generally and just have a straight rope and say, Kevin, hold on to this end, and I'm going to hang over this end and jump off the cliff, right? Ropes are meant to be knotted properly. So these ratings that I'm giving you, right, the manufacturer ultimately determines what the rating is. The ratings are for a rope with a properly tied knot, right? So like an 8mm rope with a figure of 8 knot in one end and a figure of 8 knot in the other end is still rated at 10 kilonewtons, right? It's actually rated at, if we did this, it's actually something else, right? And you can look that up in the manufacturer's stuff, but we're thinking of, I'm gonna take this rope and I'm gonna use it, I'm going to put some proper knots in it, and I'm going to do stuff with it. And so these numbers that I'm giving you are what we call working numbers for the rope. I think that's a little bit easier to remember.
well, it's also important to know the difference between working and breaking. Mm-hmm. Is this the working load or is it the breaking load? Because they're different. They're really
Right. But if we start, I would argue though that at least for our purposes, if we start talking about like, is this the breaking strength or the working strength or the breaking strength? We probably shouldn't be having that conversation, right? We should probably think of a different. Maybe we shouldn't be doing this. Maybe we should be using a different rope, or maybe we should be rigging something up a different way, right? We want at least a 10-to-1 safety margin, if not more, in our system, right? So that's why if we use an 8mm rope, which is rated at 10 kilonewtons, and we have somebody tie into the end, and we lower them or they rappel on that rope, they're 1 kilonewton, right? And the rope is rated for 10. There's a 10-to-1. And then if we have one of these locking carabiners, now it's a 24 by the time we get to the carabiner. So the carabiner's not going to break. The rope's going to break way before the carabiner does. So let's talk real quick about building some anchors. Just some quick principles about building an anchor. We want safe access to our anchor, right? I don't want to be building an anchor with 1 foot over the edge. Right? I want to be building my anchor far enough back from the edge where I'm actually safe and I can work safely. We have to think about what's the line of travel, right? I can't just build an anchor over here if the rope is going to be going this direction, right? We kind of want to build our anchors in a way that we're thinking about how our rope is going to lie. We talked about it a little bit before, but we have to think about how that rope is going to go over the edge. If there's a really sharp edge here and a smoother edge over here, maybe we choose some anchors over here so we can go over the smoother edge, or we pad it. We talked about the rope alignment. This applies more to the rope twin tension system, but for personal safety, we have what we call the focal point, right? Where are we actually going to start? Where am I going to start my rappel, right? I can't have it so that, I'm out here and the rope is slack and somebody's going like, oh, okay, step back. I want to have it set up so that I can be here, put my full weight on the rope, test it, and then approach the edge with the rope protecting me, right? So we call that the focal point. So we want to kind of think about that when we're building our anchor. And then we want to think about, obviously, what are the anchors and our anchor points. And generally, when we're building anchors, we like to have redundant anchors, right? We don't want to risk everything on one thing. But if we've got a live tree that's this big around, that's 3 feet back from the edge and the perfect tree, and we're putting one person on it, that's probably a reasonably safe thing safe thing to do. So I thought the final thing we would do, maybe Gareth can come up and I can do a quick demo here. There's like 50 different kind of anchors, and there's like 6 pages in this book about all different kind of anchors that you can build. But trying to learn to do one thing 50 different ways results in knowing, for most people, not how to do anything at all. So I thought there are a couple kind of anchors that we could focus on. Can I have the purple one back? Awesome, thanks. So the first one that I was going to show you, it's quite simple. So I'm going to use the Dyneema just because it's easier for me to probably demo with rather than doing the webbing, right? But I could take my webbing and tie, what kind of knot would I tie to make a loop of webbing? A water knot, right? So we tie a webbing, water knot. We'd have one big loop, and the first knot is called our first anchor is called a basket. I simply loop it around here. I got 2 loops like this. And I clip that in. What do you think the strength of that is?
You said stronger.
Stronger because I got 2 strands, right? Double the rating. It's rated, they say, 38 kilonewtons or more, right? So I've got 38 kilonewtons here, 24 kilonewtons here, 10 kilonewtons on my rope. I think this anchor's plenty strong.
What's Gareth's rating? What's Gareth's rating?
Well, that's to be determined, right? So that's a good one. I like that one because it's nice and quick. It's easy to use. The downside would be, of course, if one of these strands gets cut, it all comes undone, right? But if we have one over here and one on Kevin over here, and we bring them together here, and Gareth pulls out, we're still hanging off of Kevin, right? So reasonably safe thing to use, right? And now if I've got 2 anchors, each about 40 kilonewtons, and we're hanging 1 kilonewton person off the end, I'm not too worried about those anchors, right? The other one is a girth hitch, where we simply go around like so, and we would kind of girth in, right? Loop it around. Gareth, right. So we could do a girth hitch. That's rated a little weaker, 21 kilonewtons. The other one that's very simple, that I can't really do with this, but I could do with my webbing, I could just loop my webbing around Gareth, and I could get it just so, and I could tie my water knot right here, right? And I could adjust that exactly how I wanted to, right? It's a little bit fussier. It takes a little bit longer because I have to tie my water knot here, but it would give me really the ability to get that knot exactly where I'd want it to be. And the single loop is rated at 22 kilonewtons, right?
Chris, would you want to do like the wrap 3, pull 2 in a
Yeah.
situation like that?
That's the final one that we can do. You wouldn't necessarily do it with this sewn sling, but you would do it with a single strand of webbing, and we would wrap it around 3 times, tie a knot, and now we've got 3 loops, and we would grab 2, usually the 2 that the knot is not in, and we would pull them. And a wrap 3, pull 2 takes a little bit more, it's a little bit fussier to tie, right? Because we got to start wrapping this thing and then tying our knot and then pulling the 2 strands. But when would that be a really handy, why would we even bother, right? So I can,
Very strong.
it's very, very strong, right? But why else might that be good, right? As opposed to, say, my basket hitch, where I can just go clip, clip, boom. I'm ready to go in about 10 seconds. Why would I do a wrap 3, pull 2 when I could just use a basket hitch? What would be the situation where I'd go, ooh, this might not be the best thing?
All lines gonna change.
What if Garrett's a rock and he's a little slippery on the back? This thing could slip right up over the top, right? Depending on how I was going to weight this thing, right? So if I needed more friction, or I wanted more friction, like around a big rock or something, wrapping that thing 3 times and pulling 2 strands gives us a ton of friction, especially when you're using something much thicker like the webbing. So that's why that's in our package of recommended
It also stays
once
up.
you-
If you need your system up off the ground, the wrap 3, pull 2 stays around his waist. If this gets unloaded, it drops straight to his ankles, right? And now your system just dropped to the ground, right? So if you need your system to stay up high for any particular reason, keep your gear out of the ground and stuff like that.
Maybe the ground's not even,
Maybe the
right?
ground's not even. That's another reason to do either the girth or the wrap 3 pull 2. It actually keeps it right where you want it on your anchor.
So I'm going to say for our purposes on Saturday, if we do basket hitches are acceptable, girth hitches are acceptable, wrap 3 pull 2 is totally acceptable, and a single loop will be totally acceptable. And if you've got something else that you want to try, as long as it's in this list of about 50 different anchors in here, we can certainly try it out. But I thought having a handful of things to try might be better than having a whole bunch of different ones to try. So Saturday, we're going to be setting up, instead of Gareth and Kevin and Greg and I setting up the ropes for you, you guys are going to be setting up the ropes and the anchors, and we'll be double and triple checking everything before we actually put weight on them. Questions? Comments? Thoughts? Okay.